Good morning, everyone. It is another episode of Coastal Drone Weekly Live. My name's Ian. I've got Jen and Finn with me as well. And today, this week, we're talking about making money with thermal drones. We're going to be covering the basics of what drone thermography is at a high overview. And we will then be getting into kind of some opportunities, some hardware, and talk about just like what you can potentially do with using a thermal drone. Like I said, we're going to talk about what is drone thermography, what makes a good drone, what are the legal requirements to operate a thermal drone? How do I interpret the thermal images? And kind of what are the best practices?
Yeah, so last time we were talking about multispectral imaging. So that's imaging using different portions of the electromagnetic spectrum. And one of the slices of the electromagnetic spectrum is infrared. And you can do a lot of different things with infrared, but one of the things that's interesting about infrared is objects at different temperatures output different amounts of infrared radiation. So, if we're able to capture that difference in temperature, difference in infrared output, that means we can effectively measure the amount of energy it's giving out, the amount of heat energy it's giving out.
To be clear, none of us here are thermographers. Finn's probably the most educated when it comes to this. It's reflective. So it's reflecting thermal energy or emissive, right? So it has to be either a reflective surface, and that's then going to be a heat source bouncing back off of it, like the sun or something else. Or if it's emissive, it's because the entity itself or whatever the object is has thermal energy that it's giving off in infrared. Thermal drones, the high level, right? They're equipped with infrared cameras, right? So we have visible cameras, which are RGB, right? The multispectral cameras, which can do near infrared and then certain bands of light, and then thermal cameras, which go right into that thermal spectrum. So it moves up. We've got near infrared waves, shortwave, medium, long, and then far infrared. Those are all emissive bands that then after that, it's no longer visible. Well, this is no longer isn't visible, but it's no longer in that spectrum, and it moves into radio waves or microwaves. So they're good at a high level for, like, we're going to talk about more detecting leaks, hotspots, and differences. It's something that's naked. It's invisible to the naked eye, and it's going to be something that's easy for you to pick up using a thermal sensor. General benefits of using thermal drones, right? You're going to be able to detect problems earlier. You're going to save a lot of money by inspecting assets without breaking them down or destructing them or tearing them apart to get inside to something. So non-destructive testing, one of the big components of that is thermal testing. Just like anything, when we talk a lot about drones, right? One of the goals of using drones in inspection or industrial work is getting someone off a ladder, getting someone off a roof, getting them out of a height area where they're at risk of falls or anything else. So you're improving safety. Right? You're not manually needing to climb up that tower to get up close and do a spot measurement. Like I said, find hot or cold spots or any other abnormalities that are invisible to the naked eye. It's something you can't see. The only way to know if it's hot or cold is either to touch it, which isn't ideal, or to use a thermal camera or sensor. So search and rescue and wildfire fighting, right? Hotspot detection. So this kind of goes into what you're talking about, right? So we'll talk about opportunities available as well, but commercial assets.
So of course, the big question is how do we make money doing this, and what jobs are available and what type of work is available. A quick little research last night and a little bit more this morning. There's quite a few different things you could do. They all can kind of go in together. They can be separate. You can do a couple of different ones, combine them, and things like that. See, there's the obvious ones, which would be firefighting. It would be detecting house fires, forest fires. Again, taking the firefighters out of these dangerous areas and putting a drone in place of that is going to save lives regardless. These also have a level of ability to, after the destruction of something, unfortunately, but they can kind of assess the big picture as well. You can always use drones, as we know, for a larger picture of what's actually happened after the fire as well. So they're used in multiple ways, and it's definitely going to help the future with firefighting. Another one would be power line inspections. These would be used to see any electrical issues on power lines. Again, you're saving money just like you would with firefighting on manned aircraft, and you're saving time as well. Roof inspections, another great way. You could do it with a commercial building. We could do it with your house as well. You'll find leaks, heat leaks from the house, and then you can then assess the damages to your roof and fix those problems before they get any bigger or before you have a larger issue on your hands. Another one, what that would be obvious, would be search and rescue. Huge, huge for finding people fast. Anyone that's gone missing, anyone in maybe a situation where they're trying to find a criminal that's ran away. Again, this is saving time, money, energy. Getting a manned aircraft doesn't take 2 seconds to lift off. It's a production. Having a drone to do that and also spread wider, you can get a drone to go quite fast in a larger area. So you're covering a larger space, you're getting it up faster. So time, money, and energy you're saving there as well. Solar panels was another one. I never thought about this one, but I thought it was interesting. If you have a solar panel farm, you can see how the efficiency of your solar panels are running based on individual panels. So you go take the thermal drone over top, you see which ones are actually emitting heat from the sun after they've absorbed the energy. So you can see if there's any damages or you need to replace one without having to do that manually, going through individually and assessing the situation. Again, wildlife research and biomass as well. Biomass can cause their own fires, they heat up. And then wildlife research as well. We can start tracking migration patterns. You can watch where animals are sleeping, eating. We can have all that tracked just from a thermal drone and watching them as they do their day-to-day life without really disrupting them and following them around in a helicopter or something like that.
So one of the things with you mentioned biomass, and so biomass is either like peat moss piles, stuff that's going to be rotting, or manure or fertilizer, anything else that like you've got to be concerned about temperature of either the core of the pile or the exterior of the pile. So for example, peat moss, I drive by a peat moss pile every day on my commute. And last summer there was a fire, and peat moss, as it breaks down, it starts to elevate in temperature and off like create heat. And it can get to a point where it rots so much that it'll just combust, having some sort of thermal tracking or alerting system. That's one of the like huge values of safety there. And then same thing if you're just breaking it apart, like when they're trying to put the fire out last year, they basically had to spread out all this peat moss to the point where it's everywhere, trying to find the hot spots and get rid of it and let it dry itself out. The key terms that I keep hearing in the news is zombie fires lately. And zombie fires are fires that are held over from the previous season that was then covered by snow or covered by ground or foliage. And there is a hot spot in the ground that is not necessarily visible to the naked eye, but all it would take is a windstorm or a super hot, dry day for all the fuel, so the wood and moss and everything around it, to be dry enough for it to continue. So it's an ember or a smoldering fire. Really easy to spot this with a thermal camera in the right conditions. Really difficult to spot it flying over with just a visual survey. So
Well, and it's not to say that there isn't like time and effort put into these things, but the amount of time that it would take to maybe check this once a week,
yeah,
once a month, with a drone is so accessible. With a helicopter,
yeah, like a drone pilot could cover a 200 square kilometer area in a reasonable amount of time and effort and minimal travel, especially with the new laws coming next year. When you start getting into low risk routine beyond line of sight operations, and you've got extended visual line of sight, and then you've got low risk beyond line of sight as well. Let's say it's 4 kilometers to be safe that you can fly line of sight straight out. So now you've got a 4 kilometer radius, and that is an area that you can cover from one spot using drone pilot and an airspace scanner, and you can visually see airplanes in 4 kilometer radius. So that's probably still going to be extended line of sight. There's people right now actively out scanning with helicopters for wide areas because there's a huge amount of area that needs to be covered fast. But if you work in a local area, potentially you could cover a small area like a cut block or something like that using a drone as well, and then just routinely survey it, right, and be confident. So it's more about getting data faster. The reality is, like anything that's DJI, they all more or less right now use the same thermal sensor. They're all more or less the same resolution or the same sensitivity or the same technology right down to either using the same sensor. So considerations are going to be in the application or the need that you want to fly it, right? So do you need something that's super portable? Do you need something that's got really high wind resistance? Do you need something that's got weather resistance? Flight time, transmission strength, like that's becoming less of a variable these days, but it still is. Portability, sensitivity, so delta in or millikelvin, and then thermal resolution, which is how many pixels of video the sensor can actually deliver. The only other thing that I didn't mention on here, and it's going to be more and more of a factor, I think, with the climate, and it's much bigger topic than that I want to have on this kind of discussion, but country of origin is definitely in the thermal world going to be a factor because thermal drones are typically going to be used either at a high level industrial commercial or likely as a subcontractor to a government entity. And in the States right now, there are some bills in process that potentially are putting DJI at risk of being able to be used in general at the FCC level. It's something to bring up if you're considering a major investment. It's not about the hardware is wrong. The hardware is the best of the best. Absolutely. We're not able to defend it as Canadians because we can't speak to our representatives. It's not at a threat, but everything that happens in the States potentially trickles upward. So our American audience out there, you need to be aware and start looking into what's going on with the current bills that are on the table regarding the FCC. So here's a rundown of all the current prosumer, these are definitely not consumer drones, but prosumer up to full enterprise drones that are out there that all essentially have the same capabilities. What's not on this list is also the new Matrice 3D-T, which is part of the DJI Dock 2 package. So it's more of a stationary platform, but it essentially has the same sensor payload as the Mavic 3 Thermal / the Matrice 30T. So Autel has the Evo Dual 640T. It's about $6,000 US. The other one that's kind of at the entry price point, if you can still find them, is the Mavic 2 Enterprise Advanced. They're about $4,500 US. You're most likely looking at the used market. So it's a good option for getting a drone. But now with the Mavic 2 platform being end of life, you're going to have a harder time finding batteries for it. Probably get a good deal on some hardware, something used.
And also, if it's end of life, you don't know when they're going to pull the safety assurance declarations.
That is true.
From what I can gather, it seems that TC is being a little bit more proactive with some of the end of life hardware. So I would say that like how long it took the last generation to be taken away, that might not be indicative of how long it's going to take.
So the reality is right now, a Mavic 3 is a safe investment. I don't know like what their lifespan is for the enterprise, but DJI has done in the past. They've carried forward battery generations. So the Matrice 300 to the 350, if they do a Mavic 3.5 or something like that, they're probably you're fairly safe in buying a Mavic 3 platform right now. The 3 Enterprise only came out last year, so that's going to be solid for a while. They've invested a ton of money in developing these drones. They're going to use that platform as long as they can. And I've said it lots before, like on the multispectral side, we talked about this. If you run a drone business, you could buy a Mavic 3 Pro for your video collection side, and then a multispectral or a thermal or an enterprise on your industrial inspection side, and you just use the same batteries and the same cases and the same everything. The only difference is in the controllers and the software. Autel has the EvoMax 4T. I think it's now actually on the market. Parrot and Affy USA is another one. So the Parrot and Affy is a blue certified drone, so it's good for American government work as well as the Teledyne, the FLIR Suras. It's also a blue certified drone. And then, of course, the DJI stuff, we've got the Mavic 3, then the Matrice 30, and then going all the way up to the Matrice 300 and now the 350 as well, which both they can share the same gimbal, the Zenmuse H20T. That price point is for the drone and the payload, which are two separate things. You look across the top, these are all essentially, aside from the Parrot, they're all the same resolution for the sensors. So they're all 640 by 512 pixels, give or take. And they all operate at about the same frame rate, so 30 hertz. The Parrot has a 60 hertz option, the Teledyne as well, but that just means the videos can be a little smoother when you're doing sensor acquisition. The Matrice 30 had the ability to overspeed and also over resolution. So it would do like a pixel doubling capability, but mechanically it's still a 640 by 512 sensor. They all essentially use the same type of sensor. It's an uncooled microbolometer type sensor. So then the differences start to happen in like the level of field of view. So 60 degrees, 30, like these, it's not zoom as much as it is like there's a little bit of magnification happening. They each have different thermal lenses and it's sapphire glass. So it's different type of lens. So you might have a little more magnification depending on the drone. So that's where you start looking at what level of detail, at what distance do I need to be to get that minimum level of sensitivity and image size. So the narrower the field of view that you see on the thermal camera, the higher level of magnification. They're all the same pixel pitch, which means they are all the same sensor size, right? That's pixel pitch is if what this is at a microscopic level. If you had a pixel here and a pixel here, pixel pitch is the distance between the pixels. And the bigger the pitch is, the resolution is the same, but in theory, it means that, well, your sensor is going to be physically bigger if they're all the same, is the easiest way to explain it. Basically, everything's the same and when it comes to the thermal cameras. And these are all in the drone cameras. And this is what's causing this is like miniaturization of the sensor, weight, cooling, everything else. These are all uncooled sensors. When you're considering operating thermal, there really isn't much of a stretch on the legal side. You have to have a basic or an advanced pilot certificate. I don't think there are any publicly available thermal drones that weigh less than 250 grams. So you need a pilot certificate to fly it in Canada. In the States, again, if you're doing thermal imagery collection, you're doing it for commercial purposes. You need a Part 107. You're going to need permission to operate the drone wherever you're operating it. So if you're in controlled airspace, that's through nav drone, getting your approval. If you're in an environment that is either military or a special circumstances, you might need an SFOC. I put that more in for thinking about emergency scenarios. So if you're working an event or you are providing ISR services to a law enforcement agency or something like that as a contractor, then there might be an SFOC kind of requirement there. Or if you're flying beyond line of sight for wildfire detection, or if you're flying over 400 feet. Going into wildfire again, if you are operating in Class F restricted airspace, which is automatic, right? So 5 nautical miles and 3,000 feet is the bubble around the perimeter of a fire.
Yeah, and that's only if it's like a single point fire. If the fire expands, it's still the same 5 nautical miles, but if the fire expands, there's a very high likelihood that Class F will be expanded via NOTAM.
Exactly.
To be much larger than the 5 nautical mile, 3,000 foot buffer. I think in the West Bank wildfire last year, it was basically the entire west of the Okanagan Lake, and it was up to 18,000 feet instead of 3,000.
Yeah, they closed the entire airspace. And then it was L-shaped. It wasn't a circle. There was an app called NOTAM Map that would automatically draw circles around NOTAM notices based on the Latin long coordinates, but it wasn't. The one shortcoming of it is it didn't do well with irregular geometry like an L-shaped NOTAM.
Yes, but last year's fire season, Nav drone had the NOTAM or the CYRs drawn accurately.
Yeah.
So hopefully that will still remain reliable for this year's fire season, which I think has already started.
It has. So getting into that, you will need permission from whoever controls that airspace. So in British Columbia, BC Wildfire Service or Ministry of Lands Forest would be the entity that you need to get a hold of to get permission to fly in that. So assuming you're a subcontractor of them, this would all be taken care of. But if you're working for some other entity, say you're doing like for insurance inspection after a fire, and it's like, well, we want to do a house inspection, but there's still a CYR active even though the fire is out. Because the CYR, the restricted airspace, if there is a fire on the BC fire map, a CYR is automatically in effect for that area. So if it's not out or off the list, then you can't fly in the vicinity of that. It could be a clear blue sky day, no indication of fire whatsoever, but there may still be an active wildfire over top of you. So in that situation, you need to go through the steps to figure out which fire agency, because there's 6 or 7 zones for BC, for example. Like if you're in Kamloops, it's the Kamloops zone. If you're in the Lower Mainland, it's the Coastal Fire Center. So you'd have to contact the radio room or some agency there. You want to do a bit more research on that and figure out what is applicable to your area and the process. And we can probably chat about that in the community more because it's a process. I've done a bunch of flight reviews during a wildfire and had no problem getting it, but it took a few steps and a lot of phone calls to explain what we were doing and explain. Again, you're operating a thermal drone now, so you have the ability to see something that's not necessarily visible to the naked eye. So privacy laws are going to be even more tested, I would say, in this. I don't really have an interpretation on this because it is something I just want you to consider when you're operating a thermal drone. You should consider thermal privacy.
We've done a whole privacy episode
I think it's like in the next couple episodes.
episodes, yeah. But just a basic summary: if you're using a drone for work, you're under the same privacy laws that a normal business would be under. So, if you come from the pro photography background, you have to follow the same standards for privacy for that. There are privacy guidelines for businesses who are capturing image, and you have to.
You basically have to discard anything that you obtain that is identifying information unless it is essential to the operation that you're doing. And that would be...
Or you've obtained permission.
Yeah, permission, or like you're working with law enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
How do I interpret thermography images, Finn?
When we're talking about these sorts of things, I've used this term in the last couple episodes, but this is about remote sensing. And remote sensing is like master's or PhD level for data interpretation. So there are different standards for thermographers. There's different levels of being a thermographer, which you have on the screen here.
Yeah, they've kind of standardized on like level 1, 2, and 3. Financially, it's about a $2,000 to $3,000 US course. It's a multi-day course to do it. Typically, it's done in person. There's like ITC, I think, has like 6 or 8 spots across Canada that they do it at certain times of the year. So I would hazard this is kind of getting into the same territory as like survey, where you really can't stamp or sign something off unless you're at an engineer or some sort of certification level. So really what we're saying is hire someone that's qualified and certified to do it. It's kind of the same as the multispectral last week, where your job is to collect the data and work with an expert. Mm-hmm. So if you want to be a generalist drone pilot and focus on getting the flight hours and getting the drones in the air and being a service provider, unless you've got that niche expert training and want to dive deeper into it, like non-destructive testing or something else, it's probably going to serve you better to be an everyman type person that can be available to do multiple jobs.
Mm-hmm. And I'll just say this, like you might be sitting there thinking like, oh, well, do we really need the certification? Like, it's just the thermal imaging. You do not want to be held liable if the data that you provide to someone turns out to be bogus or that your interpretation is wrong. If you send that, say you do a hotspot detection and you go in there cold, without a ton of experience, and you misinterpret the data, but there was a hotspot that you missed.
Yeah.
Then you're liable you could potentially be held liable for that because you put your name on it. If you send that to an expert, and the expert then finds the hotspot, well, then there's no problem. But
it's no different than when you go to get an X-ray or an MRI or something else, and you try and ask the tech, like, well, what does that spot mean? And they're like, your doctor will discuss the results with you. So.
Yeah, exactly. Or like, it's exactly like that. Like, you go for an ultrasound and you ask them what that is, and they say, that's your kidney. And you're like, how does it look? And they're like a kidney.
Yeah. Okay, end conversation. Let's keep going. I don't think my liability insurance premiums could handle this. Yeah, and John in the text is here. So yeah, there's a certification and a rodeo that you need to do for hotspot detection. So both on the helicopter and the drone side. So when you get certified or when you go onto the standing offer, they actually send you to a test site, and you need to fly over the test site. And there are known spots that they know of. And then what they're looking at is your data coming out of that. So they know, do you identify the hotspots properly? Like provide the format that they want it to be in. So like a GPS tracked and everything else. That's good. Thanks, John, for pointing that out. And it happens once a year, basically. Oh, and Jason's saying in the chat here, recommend Infraspection Institute for online training. Plan on getting level 2 if you want to make comments based on temperature reading. All right. So best practices, and this is kind of general, right? We're still at a high level overview of this realistically, but follow your standard operating procedures. If you want to get good data in, you got to be consistent in how you do that. So different sensors are going to have different best practices, but a rule of thumb is going to be try and get, for example, if you're trying to do emissive readings, right? So you're trying to figure out is the ground hot? You're not going to be able to tell if the ground is hot if the sun is shining down on the ground. You're not going to be able to tell if the roof is hot or cold if it's being baked by the sun in the midday. So you're either going to want to wait till the sun is below the horizon, like so early morning or late in the evening. And then be consistent. If you're doing change management or measuring differences, it's not going to be any value to you if you fly at 5 o'clock on a Tuesday and then 10 o'clock on a Thursday and then 2 a.m. on it, because it's all going to have different temperature readings, because either you're going to have sun soak, right? The ground is going to be hot, then cool off, or you're going to have different weather factors as well. So time of day, weather, be consistent in how you do it. Try and fly the same path if you're doing the same thing over and over again, or even if it's different locations, always try and start by having some sort of calibration card or some sort of ground-based reading. In multispectral, you have a calibration card that you have to use. On thermal, it's basically the same. You want to have some sort of reflective calibration card. And avoid moisture. And this was more, if there's any moisture in the air or any moisture on the ground, it might throw off your readings as well. There's a risk of getting moisture on the sensor, and that could completely throw off your reading as well. And you might not be able to see it in your thermal image.
We have a saying in remote sensing, and I think Ian said it last week, but that's garbage in, garbage out. There is no way to rectify bad data collection. You can't, if the data has been collected poorly or it's been collected in a way that leads to inaccurate data, no technician in the world could turn that bad data into something useful. The final product is only as good as the data that you collect. You can kind of think about it, it's like at every step you might lose a little bit of data. So if you imagine it like a staircase, right? If you start at the top of the stairs and you have to walk down 3 steps, then you're at a higher level. But if you start at the third to bottom step because your data was crap and then you step down 3 steps, well, now you're in the basement, and the data that these people have paid for is not
Basement dweller.
Yeah, is not helpful.
The visuals.
Yeah.
Getting lots of visuals today.
All right, so let's go back to getting jobs and kind of what to expect. So you can pick up. We were talking about salary there, Jen.
Oh yes. So we did a little bit of looking around on the internet. The salary range was fairly large. Basically, a drone pilot in this industry could probably expect to make about 50 to 60,000 USD per year. That's about 80,000 to upwards of 90,000 Canadian. Specialties are going to earn you more. If you're in a more niche market or an area that you're kind of soloing, then you probably can potentially charge more. But that's varying degrees of that. If you're thinking about making this a side hustle, Ian kind of chatted about that. You would have to walk it down and figure out your day rate. It would be reasonable to say that you probably, if you're only going to work 2 days a week, you might not be making $80,000 a year, but you can maybe cut that in half, quarter, however you want to make that happen. But it would make more sense to make it a day rate if you're trying to make this a side hustle. And then again, how to find this work, you're just going to have to put yourself out there. You're going to have to be scouring the internet. You want to look for ads. You want to look for platforms where they're requesting this type of work. You want to check out your local area. Where do you live? What's going on in your local area? What's there a need for? If you live in BC, it's fires for sure. Like that's jump right on it. If you live somewhere else, it could be the water level. It could be the wildlife. Maybe just do some research on where you live and what's necessary in the area. And network, put yourself out there. It's not going to be something that's just handed to you in your lap. You're going to make investments and then you're going to have to scrounge to get the investment back. But clearly there is work. We've discussed it in lots of our weekly lives. I'm always surprised to hear what people are willing to pay once you kind of get your skill level going and your ability to, again, put out that great data. If you're putting out good data, then you're a valuable asset to any company. So you want to make sure that you're doing all those things right and you're in the right place in the right time. And you're in that circle of getting experience, and then you spend money to make money.
The reality of it is, like, anytime someone asks us about getting a drone job, it's, well, what are you good at before being a drone pilot? And you play to your strengths. And if you're in inspection, if you're in non-destructive testing already, it's crazy not to have a drone in your toolbox because it's another tool. The point of this is to give you that reach and that edge and that flexibility and add that diversity. If you're looking for opportunities and you're new to the drone space and you're new to this as well, get out with an inspection company, get out with a search and rescue team, volunteer. They may already have the hardware and they're just looking for someone that wants to be at the controls and flying. There's an opportunity there just to build skill and network. Networking is going to get you the opportunities that will lead to could be either a lucrative side hustle or a full-time career in drones. There's more and more, because it's still going to be someone that's ultimately manually responsible for the aircraft. Whether the drone itself is flying by autopilot or AI or anything else, there's still at the end of the day going to be a pilot in command of that drone. So you do need to have those skills when it comes to.
And I think too, like, just to touch on it, it might seem like an obvious thing, but I feel like starting where you're passionate. I mean, let's be honest. If you're not excited about what you're going to do, then what's the encouragement? What's the incentive to go do it?
Yeah.
So find an area that you might be excited about, even if it is money motivated, and focus on that area, and then build up from there, I would say.
There's nothing wrong with getting paid for doing something you want to do,
Yeah.
right? So
It's the dream.
yeah. So I guess we can open it up to questions at this point and kind of see what discussion and go from there. The only one we did we mention the Matrice 3D? Yeah, we did.
You just briefly mentioned it, but
Yeah.
because it just got released, we don't have like a ton of, and it's not like a traditional, or it's a little bit different of a platform.
Christian has a great question in here, actually. Can any drone be a thermal drone, or is it specific? So it's a specific camera because the sensor has been tuned for a different wavelength of light. So any RGB camera can be filtered to specifically go for only red or only green or only blue, which is kind of like a multispectral. You can do fake multispectral, but thermal is a completely different sensor material. So it's not like a CMOS or a CCD type sensor. It's a different type of construction entirely. So it is specific to thermal imaging. It's not the same as putting an infrared filter, right? So infrared light, which is in the spectrum, and you do get pollution. So most digital cameras have a filter that blocks out infrared light, whereas thermal cameras have that filter removed, but it's not a full infrared spectrum sensor at that point. It's only like the edge, right? So like thinking about infrared film photography in the old days, that wasn't a thermal film. It was sensitive to infrared light, but it happened to be more like just on the edge of visibility. So you get that weird, like inverted look. So I watched, it's unrelated, but it's kind of cool. When they shot the movie Nope, a lot of the movie scenes are shot like day for night, and they shot it on IMAX film. And in order to maintain the film look, what they also did is at the same time they shot with a digital film camera, a large format or Alexa 65, and they shot the Alexa 65 inverted in infrared. And then they took that image, the infrared image, and flipped it back so that it was now black sky at night. And then they layered the film on top of it to get a day for night look.
Oh,
So
crazy.
you could shoot at daytime, but it would look like it's nighttime. Was the idea.
That film is, it looks really great. I never knew that.
Never saw it.
Oh my gosh. Coming from the guy who doesn't watch Netflix, like there's nothing wrong with it, but
Yeah.
I saw the new Godzilla movie.
that's what he wants to talk about. The new Godzilla. Doesn't Godzilla have like a robotic arm in that?
No, it's the monkey that has the robotic
Oh my
arm.
We can only
God.
talk about it if it has thermal vision.
Does he
be
have
on
thermal?
topic.
Well, doesn't Godzilla shoot lasers out of his eyes?
No, he has nuclear breath. Come on.
Nuclear
It's like-
breath.
Gamma ray pulse.
Okay. Wow. Worth it?
Save us, audience. More questions, please.
Was it worth the money?
What else is coming out in thermal drones these days? Well, the Matrice 3DT was the most recent one. Yeah, it's realistically, like, well, one thing we did talk about fires on the wildfire sense, but also firefighting. There's another drone platform out there called the Photokite that would be worth checking out if you're looking at thermal stuff. I've talked to a couple fire departments. They're using it because it's a semi-autonomous flying platform. It's not really a drone in the sense that it will take off. It's tethered, so it's got an indefinite power supply. It's unlimited flight time. And because it doesn't have the ability to fly in any horizontal sense, its job is to go up and stay there. It doesn't require a pilot's license to fly. It's not an RPAS in the sense of that. So fire departments are using this. They're putting them on the back of trucks. They roll up to the truck or to the scene, turn this thing on. It takes off and hovers, and now it can rotate, but it also has a gimbaled thermal camera on it. So they've got real time thermal imaging of a structure fire that they can then see on the ground right below there, but also can be transmitted back over 5G to the captain or whoever is the incident commander that is offsite as well.
And can that one also put out a Wi-Fi hotspot?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, so then you can improve communication in the bush.
Yeah, there's what are they called? Cell towers on wheels, or it's like cows or something like that. There was an acronym, I can't remember what it is, but the idea is in emergency situations, it's kind of unrelated as well, but tethered drones, you can pop up either emergency lighting for a scene, which is great because you could throw up like a 4,000 watt HMI on a drone. If it's tethered, it doesn't really matter. Or you could throw up a 5G cell tower right then and there, and then have either a relay system or whatever. So you've got incident command and emergency, and then canopy FM radio stuff as well. Computer's now updating Outlook. That's a good time to do it. So, all right, I think we'll wrap there if no one else has any other questions. Thank you so much for joining us this week live again on the Coastal Community. If you're watching this after the fact, we have more episodes in the queue, definitely by now, and there's lots coming as we work deeper into the world of drones and we kind of progress through. If you haven't watched previous episodes, we've got a great one on the basics of photography, the basics of videography, all the way through to how to edit photos and video, multispectral, and now thermal. And we're going to keep going. We've got more to come. So keep checking back every week. If you can get on to Coastal Community, it's community.coastaldrone.co. And you can join us live and have your questions answered just like today. And if not, you can always watch us on YouTube. Please be sure to like and subscribe. And if you find this relevant, share it with your friends. It really helps us out as we try to grow our channel. Thanks again, and we'll see you next week.